Oregon Join Line!
Hi everyone! 2020 was certainly a challenging year for most of us, but with many of us stuck at home, it turned out to be a pretty good year for model railroading. With a significant chunk of time freed up from working at home and not having to commute, as well as no possibility of hosting op sessions, I was able to tackle some larger projects that I've been eyeing for several years. When I built the layout, I wanted to give my operators wide aisles, and so I made them between 3.5 and 4 feet. Now, with several years of op sessions under my belt, I've had a pretty good feel for where I might be able to expand the scenery a few inches into the aisle without really affecting the movement of my operators. In some of these spots, the tracks are right up against the edge of the layout, and adding a few inches of scenery out into the aisle would really open up the photo possibilities. The first project I tackled was this scene between the north end of Fossil Siding and Oregon and Northeastern Crossing. In all the op sessions I've hosted, I've never noticed any operator congestion in this dead-end aisle, so I got pretty aggressive in expanding the scenery. The steps in the process were to mock up the limits of the potential expansion, take down the existing fascia, extend the benchwork joist to hold the new layout area, stack up the glued foam and then contour it to amass the existing scenery, paint the foam, and then finally add ground cover and trees to the new scenery and reinstall the fascia. I was extremely happy with my first effort, as I'd always felt like this scene had great potential for photography, but was limited by the tracks being too close to the edge of the layout. Armed with my success, I began looking at other areas in the layout I could do the same thing with. The next area I chose was this wide open section between Dayville and Bear Creek Viaduct. The track was quite close to the edge here, and the aisle was already pretty narrow, but it was enough of a choke point that operators never try to pass each other. Because the slopes are quite steep here, I was able to add a significant amount of scenery, even though it only extended an additional 3 inches into the aisle at the most. Next up was the area leading out of the big cut near Greystone. Followed by the S-curve at Yellow Jacket Lake. The most significant scenery expansion project was the reconfiguration of the big curve scene coming out of Picture Gorge. This area has a low backdrop against the aisle so that it can be photographed from multiple angles. But the track leading out of the curve was quite close to the aisle, and I recognized that it wouldn't take too much to open up the scene to nearly limitless photo possibilities. A lot of work and engineering went into the scene the first time, and I wasn't looking forward to dismantling much of it and rebuilding, but I pressed on and was ultimately very excited by the results. By adding a maximum of 4 inches to the scene, I completely opened up the photo angles, not only for the actual scene itself, but also in terms of dramatically improving the background for more distant scenes. Shifting gears, in the middle of the year I purchased a couple 3D printed Laterno log stackers from Clever Creek Miniatures, which are about the right size to handle entire loads from log trucks or rail cars, but their size overwhelmed my log yards. After I expanded the log yard to accommodate one of the new Laternos, I began thinking about other changes I could make and recalled the forest products company Anderson & Middleton that my dad and grandfather worked for along the coast of Washington State. I always thought they had a great logo and paint scheme. My modeling buddy Greg McComas painted this Alco S2 switcher up in the Anderson & Middleton scheme, and I applied custom A&M decals from Circuit City. I then changed all the signage at the mill site and dedicated a fleet of company vehicles to A&M. I renamed the A&M mill as West Pine. Over on the Oregon and Northeastern Forest Products short line, the other huge new Laterno stacker overwhelmed the log yard at Scanlon as well. To free up space, I relocated the paved road leading into the pulp mill off the layout. This gave me enough room to expand the log stacks a bit, as well as giving the Laterno a much larger footprint to move about. I've contemplated for some time what to use for power on the Oregon and Northeastern. These Bachmann GE 70 tonners seemed perfect for the job, as they were unlettered but already painted in this yellow and black scheme, complete with end striping, and there were several examples of West Coast logging lines using the 70-tonners for power. This time I printed out my own decals, and the results turned out great. The biggest new scene I completed in 2020 was this Forest Service Scanlon Work Center. Almost every significant town in East Oregon has a Forest Service presence. I ordered a fleet of 3D printed appropriate vehicles and painted them into the iconic Forest Service mint green, and then added custom decals from Circuit City. This was really a fun project, especially researching Forest Service practices for proper signage and vehicles. I hope many of you also had a productive modeling year. I'm looking forward to being able to share the results of all these projects with my operating crew in person, hopefully in the not too distant future. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Oregon Join Line!